This is as delicious as a bowl of Martha Stewart's one-pot pasta. Yes, the lifestyle genius has just scored the ultimate revenge on a certain Meghan Markle, brutally exposing her, ironically, via the Sussex propaganda organ People magazine, as being a big fat gossip of breaking all of those private agreements that Prince Harry had made with King Charles.
I think it's actually kind of cool that Martha Stewart, who's now in her 80s, she just doesn't give an F, Glenn. She's like, I'm gonna cut this bitch and I don't care if you don't like it. She's clearly mocking her.
I don't think she respects the fact that Meghan Markle is a worthy competitor of everything Martha Stewart has done.
The Sussexes betray the king. Now, following the Highgrove House summit, in which Harry, Meghan, Archie and Lily had afternoon tea with King Charles and Queen Camilla with a strict order from the king for this meeting to be private, American cultural icon Martha Stewart has sensationally revealed that Meghan has been blabbing and boasting about the reunion with her father-in-law.
Martha Stewart ended up at the same dinner table as Meghan Markle and, according to the chatter, only exchanged about 3 words with her all night. Yet that small moment was still enough to land Martha on the cover of People magazine. So, what exactly did she say?
I had dinner with Meghan Markle the other night. Well, she was at the same table, so I can't say. She wasn't my guest. I was a guest. We were both guests at a dinner party in California, and she had just gotten back from the palace. And I think I didn't talk to her really more than to say a couple words, but I know she was talking about it.
Read that again, because the chatter is saying she barely spoke to Meghan, yet she still seemed to clock exactly what Meghan was doing in that room, which made the whole moment feel even more telling.
Martha Stewart was at a posh dinner party in California and revealed to People magazine that Meghan had been boasting about her return to the United Kingdom and her face-to-face meeting with King Charles and Queen Camilla. Well,
and since Martha Stewart has never really been the type to leave a job half-finished, she was also asked about Meghan's cooking show and the idea of Meghan stepping into her space, and that is when she gave her answer. And that is exactly why people kept circling back to this moment, because the conversation was never really just about dinner. Online, viewers started reading between the lines, wondering if Martha's brief interaction said more than a long speech ever could. Some people saw it as a quiet sign that she was staying careful, while others thought it showed she understood the room better than anyone expected. Either way, the reaction picked up fast, and suddenly a small comment from Martha was being treated like a much bigger statement. That kind of response is what kept this story moving, since now every word she chose, and every pause in that answer, started to matter even more.
If you're an actress, it's hard to then transition to a princess, and then from a princess into a homemaking guru on a television show. It doesn't sort of follow, so go from there.
And that is where the moment really took shape. At 85 years old, Martha kept it to 2 sentences, calm and measured, with no big outburst, no publicist statement, and no sign of a feud. She simply set the plate down in front of everyone and let the reaction speak for itself, while the woman on the other side has, for 3 days now, acted like she has not noticed a thing.
Statistics that suggest that an older generation feels more connected and invested in the British royal family. Also, it seems like if you are an A-lister or if you are, somebody that's truly making it in the world, want to be associated with the royal family.
Now, this is the part a lot of people seem to have missed completely. A lot of the coverage has framed this like some kind of catty showdown, the lifestyle icon versus the newcomer, 2 women, 1 dinner table, and a whole lot of side-eye. That version is easy to sell, but it does not really fit what people are seeing here, and it lets Meghan off too lightly, because Martha Stewart is not being treated like Meghan's rival. Martha Stewart is King Charles's friend, and the 2 met in New York. She showed up to the event, was photographed with him, and later posted about it herself. By all appearances, she seemed genuinely excited about the moment. She has appeared supportive of the working royals for years, and she has made it pretty clear that she respects the institution, as well as the man.
Let's not forget that Martha Stewart is buddies with King Charles. Yes, she is very friendly with King Charles. In fact, she was one of the few people, many people who saw him when he went to the United States for the state visit that he did there. So is this something that was plotted between King Charles and Meghan Markle, or is Meghan Markle simply just saying crap and lies, and this was a warning shot from Martha Stewart to the palace and say, hey, she's here making lies about this so-called meeting?
Just picture that room for a second. Meghan arrives at a dinner in California, coming off a trip to Highgrove, the king's Gloucestershire home where he spends time gardening, and, according to the chatter, it was the first time in more than 4 years that her father-in-law had seen his grandchildren. It was described as a private visit, kept quiet and carefully arranged, with the intention that it would stay that way. That is why the reaction online kept getting louder, because people were not just watching a dinner story, they were watching how every detail around it was being interpreted. A brief exchange, a short answer, even the way someone carried themselves at the table, all of it started getting picked apart by viewers who thought there was more going on beneath the surface. Some framed Martha's calm approach as a sign of experience, while others said it looked like she was simply refusing to get pulled into anything messy. Either way, the conversation kept drifting back to Meghan, and that is what made the moment feel bigger than it probably looked in real time. At the same time, the contrast was hard for online observers to ignore. One side of the story was being presented as polished, controlled, and low-key, while the other was being discussed through the lens of public fascination and royal tension. That kind of contrast tends to keep a story alive, especially when people think every small gesture means something. So instead of fading after the dinner ended, the chatter kept building, with viewers still trying to decide whether this was just a quiet interaction or a very deliberate silence.
This is the sort of meeting that the king does with strangers. It's not the sort of meeting that he does with loved ones.
And then she starts talking about it. Out of all the people she could have mentioned it to, and out of all the rooms in California, she chose the one with Martha Stewart sitting right there, the one person at that table who actually knows the man she was bringing up. Some viewers would call that a careless move, not necessarily a scandal, but definitely a bold one. It can look like walking into a room with your last bit of leverage and laying it down in front of someone who has already met the king.
I don't think Meghan particularly wants to build any bridges with the UK or the royal family here. She's brought the children over because she wanted to support Harry and she wanted, like him, the kids to see their grandfather. But she's not as focused as he is on rehabilitating her image here. That matters to him. I don't think it matters to Meghan.
And Tom Sykes went straight to the detail everyone else seemed to miss. Consider the mechanics, he wrote, pointing out that Martha exchanged only a couple of words with Meghan and still walked away knowing she would be discussing her meeting with the king. That little fact moved from the dinner table into Martha's ear and then straight onto the pages of People magazine. From there, Sykes raised the question that has people talking: whose house was it? Which night did this happen? Who else was sitting at that table? And did any of them have ties to journalists? Well, one of them at least knew the king. And there is another wrinkle here that makes the whole thing look even sharper, even if nobody has said it quite this bluntly. People, the outlet many viewers say has been one of Meghan's more favorable media spaces for years, was the place Martha chose to place this story. On paper, that is a hard detail to ignore, and it is exactly the kind of move that gets people talking.
A source who hosted the event is offering a different account. I sat next to Meghan at the dinner party, and this account of what happened is simply untrue. This is bitch slapping Meghan Markle, and whoever this person is, it is Meghan Markle, because nobody is gonna dare contradict Martha Stewart, whoever was at that party.
One thing on the Tea Party, if it was going to be, the olive branch that everyone keeps on talking about, where was William? William was down the road playing polo and being photographed, walking hand in hand with his beautiful wife, near the polo ground. Now, if this was a genuine, let's bury the hatchet, not in each other, but let's just bury the hatchet and we'll all get together and sort out. William and Catherine would have been there. That would have been the ideal opportunity. The fact that they were not there just goes to show how large the gulf is between the rest of them.
But here is the part that really should make people pause. According to the chatter, Martha Stewart seemed to figure out in one evening what King Charles had already understood weeks earlier. If you go back to Highgrove, with Harry, Meghan, their 2 young children, the king and the queen, it was described as the first time those grandchildren had seen him in more than 4 years, and he clearly seemed to want the meeting to go smoothly. By all accounts, he did try to make that happen. The visit was reportedly arranged in near total secrecy, kept so quiet that William and Catherine were not even said to have been informed it was taking place. And that secrecy is exactly what made people pay attention to the contrast. Online, some viewers argued that when a meeting is kept that quiet, every little follow-up detail suddenly matters more, because people start reading between the lines. So, when Martha's dinner story ended up in a glossy magazine, commenters saw it as more than a casual anecdote. They saw it as a clue about who was willing to talk, who was willing to stay silent, and who might be shaping the narrative. That is also why the discussion kept circling back to timing. If the goal was to keep a sensitive family visit out of the spotlight, then even a small public remark could shift the mood around it. Not because it meant anything on its own, but because internet audiences tend to treat placement, timing, and tone like part of the story. And once that happens, even a short dinner exchange starts to feel loaded with meaning. So the whole conversation stopped being about one table and turned into a bigger question about discretion, media strategy, and how quickly a private moment can become a public talking point.
The only reason that Camilla was there is she wanted to make sure that nothing went wrong. She wanted to, the Queen said recollections may vary. Well, Camilla was there to make sure that no recollections may vary, that she was there to remember it all.
And she was there to protect the king because,
absolutely.
obviously, as a, let's be fair, Harry slaughtered Camilla in his book.
And then he brought Camilla into the picture. Robert Jobson, who has covered this family for 40 years and is one of the few reporters regularly told things, put it bluntly, Camilla was there to give the king emotional support, yes, but more importantly, she was there to be a witness. A witness. Phil Dampier, who has followed the royals since 1986, did not hesitate when he heard that point. He said, "You have got to have somebody there who can confirm what was said. Let that sink in." According to that framing, some viewers felt the king could not sit down for an hour with his own son and daughter-in-law without having a second pair of ears in the room. And the way commentators have described it, this was not just about protocol or ceremony. It was about having a clear record, because there was already a sense that once a private conversation involved Meghan, people would start asking how that conversation might be remembered later.
But ultimately, Camilla was there as the person to watch over the whole thing, to make sure that if the conversation started swaying towards how am I going to raise 18 million quid or whatever it is to pay, that his father didn't turn and say, "Oh, that'd be all right, darling. I'll write the darling boy," as he calls him, because ultimately it's still a crown divide.
And why would he think that? Because, from the palace perspective, they have seen this pattern before. Oprah, the book, and every private family exchange that somehow seemed to surface in print with a Sussex angle on it. The palace even has a phrase for that feeling. As they put it, recollections may vary, which says a lot without saying everything.
They wouldn't let any photographs be taken, you see. Meghan and Harry desperately wanted of the king with the little children, and that would have boosted them up, and it would have cost they could sell it for a lot of money. But they weren't having that, and they didn't want Camilla in. But Camilla was there, and she was listening and making sure that nothing happened that she wasn't okay with, and the king would be okay with. He's got better things to do than to analyse something that they say.
So he ended up taking precautions inside his own home, with his own family. Then, 4 weeks later, at a dinner table in California, Martha Stewart, at least in the way the chatter framed it, seemed to confirm that concern in the eyes of some viewers. This is the part that should really sit uncomfortably with her, if anything does. The harshest detail in this whole situation is not something Martha said, and it is not even printed in People magazine. It is the quiet reality that a father, as people have pointed out online, felt he needed a chaperone just to have tea with his own son. That is what 6 years of this has reportedly cost her. Not a title, not a house, but trust. And that is why people kept replaying the whole thing online. To some viewers, the real issue was not the dinner itself, but what it seemed to suggest about how guarded everything had become around this family. When every small interaction gets treated like a potential signal, even a simple table conversation starts to feel unusually high stakes. That kind of reaction is exactly what keeps the discussion alive, because it turns a short social moment into a wider debate about privacy, trust, and who gets to shape the public version of events. And once the audience starts looking at it that way, even silence can sound loud. So the conversation did not stay on Martha alone. it drifted back into the larger pattern people online keep pointing to, where nearly every private moment ends up filtered through public suspicion, careful wording, and a whole lot of reading between the lines.
And the reality is there's been 3 meetings with the king. And I know for a fact on the first meeting, because I wrote about it, is that when Harry came down, they made up an appointment so that the king could be interrupted. So that someone came in and said, oh, you've got your procedure, sir. He never had a procedure. He just wanted to get off to Sandringham. So the first one wasn't exactly close. The second, they exchanged a few gifts. And it was only about 35, 40 minutes again. And this meeting was probably about an hour. So is this great reconciliation? I don't think so. But at the same time, the king is in an invidious position. Any guy that's of a certain age, who's living on the other side of the world, if you can imagine it, and wants to bring him to see his grandchildren, you're just not going to say no. Making it more official, that's the problem. But if Meghan was being sensible about this, would she have raised all this? As Charlie just said, we know that they met at the Highgrove, and we know that was part of the deal was that they say nothing. She won't be able to keep her mouth shut. It'll come out. People magazine, I look forward to reading it.
Right. Now back to the dinner, because there is one part of Martha's own account that people seem to have rushed right past. By her telling, she barely spoke to Meghan at all. Read that line again. I didn't talk to her really more than to say a couple of words. A couple of words all evening, according to that account. Sit with that for a second. This was Meghan Markle, the Duchess of Sussex, one of the most talked about women in the world through marriage and media attention. After years of magazine covers, a streaming deal, and a wedding watched by an estimated global audience, she was in a room in California with Martha Stewart, and Martha, at least in that version of events, did not seem interested in carrying on much of a conversation. Not a scene, not an obvious slight anyone would have noticed in the moment, just a very polite nothing.
I just don't think they want to muddy themselves with the tarnished image of Meghan and Harry. I mean, they're the people that are desperate to make a comeback, Meghan and Harry. Everybody else seems to be doing quite well. I mean, you only have to look at the Waleses on A form. They've been really up there. And I think that even, with respect to the king, there's a lot of people upset that he's giving Harry too much traction. I think that, his trip to America, where he was brilliant, I think, in his speeches and in his reaction with Trump. I think a lot of people have got respect for him too. So yeah, I mean, the reality is the A-listers know what side their bread's buttered.
And what does Meghan do in a room where the attention does not seem to be centered on her? According to the way people have been talking about it online, she seems to reach for the king. That is the whole moment in one move. Some viewers felt she appeared to lean on the one part of her life that, for better or worse, still gets a room to turn its head.
You can just tell, can't you? There is no connection between her and those kids. She can't stand those kids. She's giving them odd looks. She's going through the motions. I mean, she's not someone, we've seen this a lot over the years. She's not someone that connects. But to try and sell the idea of heart and being a good person and love and using children to do that.
It was not the cooking show. It was not the jam. It was not any one thing she had spent 6 years trying to build. It was her father-in-law. And that is the point the sharper commentators kept landing on this week, the one that seems to sting the most. Because once people started zooming in on that detail, the whole conversation shifted. Online, some viewers read it as less about one dinner and more about what gets highlighted when public image, family ties, and status all sit at the same table. That is why the reaction kept growing, even though the original moment itself was so small. A quiet exchange, or maybe barely one at all, became the kind of thing internet watchers could build an entire theory around. Not because there was some giant confrontation, but because the lack of one seemed to say just as much. And in celebrity commentary, that kind of empty space gets filled fast. So now the focus was not only on who spoke to whom, but on what people thought that silence suggested. And that is exactly where the discussion stayed, with viewers debating whether the moment revealed distance, discomfort, or just an ordinary dinner being read way too closely.
I just don't think this is the right strategy to sell this movie, because all anyone's saying says is like, Meghan, if you had a heart, you'd speak to your dad. If you had a heart, you wouldn't have done that to Prince Philip. If you had a heart, you wouldn't have done that to Elizabeth II. Do you know what I mean? The strategy is whack.
According to online chatter, she was not seen as leaking anything. She was simply chasing attention.
Right. And it's almost like Meghan has trails of bad behavior that have, and now she's trying to show something that we just don't buy because we see the trail of dead bodies that follow her. We see all the bad behavior. And so when she shows up to speak and to try to sell something, we don't believe it because we already know the history. We know how Meghan shows up. We've been seeing it and talking about it for years. Meghan just can't win. There's no way for her to win.
She was at a high-profile dinner party in California, and according to online chatter, she may have brought up her connection to King Charles just to get noticed in the room. And even then, after all of that, the only thing Martha seemed to walk away remembering was the palace, not Meghan. Not a single word about her own life, not one detail that stood out, just the palace. There is a certain kind of loneliness in that, and honestly, some viewers said they almost felt for her if she had not spent 6 years saying she stepped away precisely so she would not need any of that attention again.
But I also think that she has been blabbing about it. To this day, I don't understand why Charles to make this public. Unless, of course, he wanted to help them out and give them gravitas, because now Meghan Markle, of course, she's going to go around and say, hey, I was with the king. I just came back from the palace, to remind everybody that she's royal, that she can see the king whenever she wants to, that she's on her way back to the United Kingdom.
Rob Shooter also reporting in another exclusive that Meghan did actually want a big birthday for her 45th, but no one wanted to be part of it. Sources telling him that the original plan was an over-the-top party worthy of the lavish New York baby shower and fairy tale royal wedding that once defined her life. Oprah Winfrey, Ellen DeGeneres, Serena Williams, Amal Clooney. Meghan loves a big party.
And once people noticed that moment at the table, it started coloring everything else, because that dinner landed in the same week as her 45th birthday, and people still remember how that played out. She posted the photos herself and thanked everyone for the birthday love. She even filmed herself dancing around her kitchen with a bundle of balloons, and when the birthday messages started rolling in, they came from 2 people. 2. Those very specific names that instantly made the whole birthday moment feel even more loaded online. It was the kind of detail that kept people talking, because when the public sees a quiet dinner exchange, a birthday post, and a wave of high-profile attention all stacked together, they start reading between every line. That is why the conversation kept drifting past the table itself and into the bigger picture of how carefully these celebrity moments get framed. Some viewers thought the reaction was less about one party and more about the contrast between what is shown, what is left out, and what the internet decides to focus on. And once that kind of discussion starts, it usually does not stay small for long. So even without anything dramatic happening in the room, the online commentary kept giving that moment extra weight, turning a simple social gathering into another example of how fast public opinion can shape the story.
One source tells Naughty But Nice she envisaged another iconic celebrity gathering where everyone who's anyone would be there. It was supposed to remind the world she was still Hollywood, but reality intervened. It quickly became obvious the guest list wasn't coming together. Another insider says people were busy, relationships had changed, and the excitement around Meghan just isn't what it once was.
No Kardashians, no Serena Williams, and no Amal Clooney were part of that particular scene at all.
And of course it did, P. Dinah, because I mean, you just look at the day. 2 Instagram posts from her, 2 Instagram posts loosely, Kelly J. Zadfin and Tracy Robbins. I mean, really, they are her ultimate loyalists who don't really have anything to lose.
2 friends were in the mix, and one of them happens to be married to a studio executive who, according to the chatter, may have owed the Sussexes a favor after they showed up at his film premiere. Lady Colin Campbell said it in her usual blunt way. Meghan, she claimed, was acting like a social climber in search of status and had drawn in plenty of big names for her wedding, only for all of that attention to fade once people moved on. Her point was simple. Whatever she managed to gather then did not seem to stick, and critics online have long repeated that same line. At the Bob Marley premiere, Rita Marley, Bob Marley's widow, and someone with nothing to prove, was said to have given them a cool reception. Lady C's version also claims the Jamaican Prime Minister and his wife did not even want to speak with the pair and had to be persuaded. Phil Dampier, who has followed the story from the start says the couple have been labeled a pair of grifters by some commentators.
It is ungracious, and whether it's the Kardashians, the Clooneys, Gwyneth Paltrow, or now Martha Stewart, seems to always fall out with celebrities.
Oh yes, I mean, because she's a very unpleasant person. That's simple. People have moved back, and that's why she's having a party on her own in the kitchen with some balloons and 2 dogs.
It, by one executive, and that was not just some tabloid rumor. It was someone inside the business, which is what made the details stand out even more. The people working for her own company, the staff trying to move the jam and the candles, were reportedly asked to send the boss a birthday message. And that is where the story really got interesting, because once people online heard that detail, they started treating it like more than just a polite birthday gesture. Some viewers felt it suggested a bigger pattern, while others said it was simply another example of celebrity circles doing what celebrity circles do, keeping things polished and tightly controlled. Either way, the reaction showed how quickly a small behind-the-scenes moment can be turned into a whole talking point. The focus was no longer just on who was present, but on what the public thought that presence meant, and that kind of speculation can take over fast.
Martha Stewart said Meghan Markle was gossiping, we're going to listen to her. And then Meghan Markle clapped back, no, I wasn't. You don't pick a fight with somebody who went to jail, who's done time in prison, and who's besties with Snoop Dogg. And not only that, who the Kardashians absolutely adored. Meghan Markle doesn't even get a greeting from anybody on her loneliest of birthdays.
Asked to do it for the boss, that is the part people may actually find telling, and it has nothing to do with jam. 6 years ago, this woman stood before the world and said she was stepping away so she could be valued for who she is, not for the title, not for the family, just herself. That was the message. That was the reason viewers were told to accept the fallout. So now look at what online critics are pointing to. The A-list does not exactly line up for her birthday. Her own staff, according to the chatter, were the ones asked to send a message. A film executive's wife posts because there is an obligation tied to that circle. And at a dinner party full of people who seemed largely indifferent, the only thing she appears left to lean on is the surname she once said she did not need. Some commentators see that as proof she never really escaped the institution. In their view, the past 6 years have only highlighted how much she still relies on it.
They have nothing to lose. It's not going to be any better. This is as good as this is going to get. If this is your wake-up call, you're screwed up. That's what it says to me. You're done, okay? So what can she do now but try to sell jam and create some nonsense with dipping your jam in some... I mean, girl, you are desperate.
Did you see her going round on her birthday yesterday? Yeah. I mean, that was completely ludicrous. It was.
Well, she seems to have thrown herself a birthday party.
By herself on her own, plus her 2 dogs. But what really got me, which was that she had a little plastic tiara on her head, which I thought was actually being rude for the king and the queen. You don't do that.
Now go back and read Martha's interview one more time, slowly, and count something specific. Count how many times Martha Stewart uses the word Duchess. Not once. Not the Duchess of Sussex, not even a polite reference to the title. Twice she names her, and both times she says the same 2 words, Meghan Markle. And that is probably not an accident, because nothing Martha Stewart puts in print feels random. Look at what that title is really doing for Meghan right now. It is not just ceremonial, and it is not really sentimental either. In the public conversation, it has become a major part of the business. Brand Sussex, as people often describe it online, leans heavily on royal proximity. That Duchess label is what some viewers say turns the jar of jam into a $40 item instead of something far more ordinary.
It was a silly little thing.
No, you're mocking royal iconography with that.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think that she did also on her T-shirt have, it's giving Mrs. Now, what do you think of that? Or shall I tell you what I think first?
Oh, I want your interpretation.
Mrs. So she's going to be a Mrs. And she's giving because she knows that her husband loves her, that she's not going to dump. She's going to go a little bit longer. But I think she's just wearing it on a sort of downhill.
Take the title away, and what you are left with is a woman from Los Angeles selling dried petals. Lady C is at it again, taking another swipe in the discussion. She is still using the Duchess label to help move products, even though she has spent very little time in Sussex across her life. And that is exactly why people keep circling back to this whole thing, because the debate is no longer just about one interview or one dinner table moment. It has become a larger conversation about image, access, and how much of the public appeal is tied to the title itself. Online, some viewers argue that the branding only works because the royal connection is still doing a lot of the heavy lifting, while others say that is simply how celebrity marketing works in general. Still, the criticism keeps landing in the same place. If the title is always part of the pitch, then every quiet appearance, every carefully chosen comment, and every polished gesture starts to look strategic instead of casual. That is why Martha's wording mattered so much to some people, because she seemed to sidestep the formal title entirely and go straight to the name itself. For supporters, that may mean nothing. For critics, it reads like a subtle but very clear message. So the conversation keeps drifting back to the same question. What exactly is being sold here, and how much of it depends on the old royal label? To a lot of online observers, that is the part that makes the whole discussion impossible to ignore.
Martha Stewart has misheard this. This is a classic sort of Sussex propaganda, isn't it? That
Yes.
It's always a source, and we know it's come directly from the Duchess.
Of course. I mean, she's very, very good at these sort of things, isn't she? That's why she's sort of stayed alive, because it's not her skills, not at all. And none of her skills are any good whatsoever. But she's got Harry with his name and his, a lot of money, but she's not herself. She's quite attractive, but not so much now.
So Martha never used it, and in that very same week, those same 7 days, the royal family apparently did not use it either. On the 4th of August, her birthday, there was silence from William and Catherine. Charles and Camilla stayed silent too. That absence stood out to people watching the whole thing.
When they take away the title from Harry and she's told that she can't use that title anymore, this woman is going to have a complete heart attack. Now she has wrapped her identity around a royal title that she hates from a colonialist family. So what is Meghan going to do now? A fight with Martha Stewart? Why does she have to clap back? Or is this something?
The official accounts, which usually seem quick to acknowledge a distant cousin's engagement, said nothing at all. Lady C then raised the obvious question and, in her own way, answered it herself, which only added to the online chatter.
And so she also has to go to England, furious. I mean, she was very rude when she came out of having met the King and Queen. And she said, oh, they were very rude to us, as if we're not part of anything. They have not been part of anything by their own wishes. I thought that was actually extremely rude and extremely unnecessary. She's got to do it, but Harry's lost a lot of money, so you've got to try and get these people who you don't like kind and to give you some money and to, what will help you keep going.
Why did the King and Queen not send congratulations for Meghan's 45th birthday? On the surface, that might have seemed like the most natural move, but the discussion online took a very different turn. People were quick to point out just how much attention Meghan usually attracts, then immediately note that the silence may have been intentional. In that reading, two very different power centers, one an American cultural figure and the other the British monarchy, both appeared to avoid using her title in the same week. No one said it outright, but the message some viewers took from that quiet approach felt pretty clear. Now. And that is where the conversation really starts to shift, because once people notice a pattern like that, every small detail suddenly feels loaded. A title, a greeting, a mention, or the decision not to mention it at all can turn into a whole public debate in a matter of hours. For some viewers, that silence looks harmless and routine. For others, it feels like a very deliberate choice, especially when the story is already being discussed so widely online. That is why this moment keeps getting attention. It is not just about one birthday message or one dinner table exchange. It is about what people think those choices signal behind the scenes. And when the reactions keep stacking up from different corners of the internet, the discussion stops being about a single comment and starts becoming about the image around it. In other words, the quiet parts are now speaking just as loudly as the public ones.
She still wants to portray herself as royal adjacent, okay? She left the royal family, but she still wants to call herself the Duchess of Sussex, to sell her products, even though I think she spent like 5 hours in Sussex in total in her whole life. And she still wants to portray herself as close to King Charles and Camilla. That is just not the case. Now, they're going back with their tails between their legs because they have this huge judgment from the lawsuit, and they're probably broke as a joke. Okay, they're 1 minute away from bankruptcy.
She is 85. So Meghan saying that would absolutely make her furious. She doesn't want anybody to recognize her age, and quite right too. But she was also quite cynical with Meghan. I mean, when she first met her, she said that I hope you know what you're doing, which was not terribly nice. And this one was, she said, assuming she's heard, if you're an actress, it's very hard to trans over to a princess and then to become a homemaking guru at any TV show. So Meghan wouldn't like that because Meghan can do anything, whatever it is, she's top of the bomb. Funny that they both have been absolutely spiking at each other.
If you think Martha Stewart did this on a whim, just because a reporter caught her in the right mood on a random Tuesday, you have not really been following the full story. According to online chatter, this has been building for 2 years. Strike one came last year, when Martha was asked about Meghan and gave an answer that sounded polite at first, until you listened a little closer. Meghan, I don't really know very well. I hope she knows what she's talking about. Then, without being pushed, she added, authenticity to me is everything. After that, she shifted to Gwyneth Paltrow and praised her in a big way. Won an Oscar for heaven's sake, she said. Very successful, pretty powerful. In that framing, Meghan was not even being measured against her. She was only being wished well.
Now, we all know what Martha Stewart is saying. We all know what Martha Stewart is doing. Martha is a royal favourite, by the way. She met up with King Charles during his recent visit to New York, and she does remain utterly seething about the fact that Meghan stole her one-pot pasta recipe, so much so that on her website, she updated the description to say, but as the Royal News Network pointed out, you can only keep confidence as if you don't tell other people.
Strike two was the recipe. Meghan featured a one-pan pasta on her Netflix series as if it had come from a quiet afternoon in a Montecito garden, but online observers pointed out that the technique had already appeared in Martha Stewart's own kitchen and was published in Martha Stewart's magazine years before Meghan ever picked up a pan for the cameras. There was no credit and no mention of where it came from. Martha did not call a lawyer, and she did not release a statement. Instead, she updated her own website with a description that read, "The original and the best." She did not name anyone, but she really did not need to. People online understood the reference immediately. Then came strike three this week, and for those following the chatter, that was the moment it all seemed to land at once. The reaction from viewers who knew exactly what they had just seen was immediate. Megyn Kelly heard the clip and called it what it looked like to her, shots fired.
But don't you think, I think it's actually kind of cool that Martha Stewart, who's now in her 80s, she just doesn't give an F, Glenn. She's like, I'm going to cut this bitch and I don't care if you don't like it. She clearly mocking her. She got back from the palace and she was talking about it. Oh, back from the palace. And how difficult it is to try to jump from these different roles right into making yourself a homemaking guru. And was telegraphing to us all, it ain't as easy as it looks. And she's failing. Like, that's really what she was saying. That's my...
Yeah, I've seen comments from her similar, not maybe as harsh, about Meghan Markle, because I don't think she respects the fact that Meghan Markle is a worthy competitor of everything Martha Stewart has done.
Glenn Greenwald described it as a kind of passive-aggressive criticism and suggested Martha is usually too direct to waste time acting as if Meghan is a serious rival to the brand Martha spent years building. Tom Sykes then wrapped up the whole situation in one sharp line, and honestly, it may be the cleanest take anyone has managed on this. And that is exactly why the clip kept spreading, because once people started reading into the tone, it was no longer just a dinner table moment or a polite public appearance. It became the kind of exchange that viewers love to dissect, where the pause between words can matter almost as much as the words themselves. For supporters, it was probably nothing more than a brief, awkward interaction. For critics and online commenters, though, it looked like another carefully observed moment in an already loaded public story. That is also why every reaction around it seemed to grow fast. The more people compared it to the earlier comments, the more they treated it like part of a bigger pattern, even if none of that has been officially confirmed. And in celebrity commentary, that is often how a small exchange turns into a much larger narrative, with everyone online trying to decide whether it was innocent, intentional, or simply overanalyzed.
Oh, I thought it was wonderful. I mean, she eviscerated her. It's very difficult to make a transition from D-grade actress to A-grade princess, and then to make it, and she's managed to do it. And I thought that Martha Stewart got the point across very elegantly, that Meghan has failed at everything.
Martha Stewart was the one showing off the sharpest knife skills here, while Meghan ended up as the onion in the comparison. After 2 years and 3 separate moments, Martha still never seemed to raise her voice once.
As you said, she's a very, she went to prison and she came out and built this whole second career, seemed to do very well in it. Obviously built a gigantic business too. Yeah, she is not somebody to play around with, and that passive aggressive criticism of Meghan Markle there was so enjoyable.
I wonder if she might be a listener to this show or to the Nerve or to the Nerve. We got to find it out. We need to know more.
I was just going to say, I think it's more of a case of Martha Stewart, is well-known, well-renowned domestic goddess, was just setting out a stall and saying, chummy, if you think you're going to try and take my crown, my domestic crown away, you're not. You're an actress, now you want to be a domestic goddess. I think it was a little bit of that sort of going on.
Shade is what you're saying. You felt the shade.
That is where the logic starts to wobble. Those 11 words got treated like a harmless opinion, but once you line them up with the numbers, they read much more like a judgment. With Love, Meghan, Season 1 opened at 38% with critics. Season 2 slipped to 20%, and the holiday special landed at 14%. On top of that, Season 2 was said to have failed to crack Netflix's top 10 in its launch week, which only added to the online chatter.
Excuse me, doesn't Meghan have as ever raspberry spread, strawberry spread, orange marmalade, bon maman, which is absolutely delicious, cheaper, and actually proper jam, and reserves, where allegedly she's executive producer, which means she is putting in money. Not only that, she also, as an executive producer, you have decision-making power. Why is she going on? This is directly her competition.
The show holding the number 10 spot that week had already pulled in 2.1 million views, and her numbers reportedly never got close to that. There is no Season 3, and the $100 million Netflix deal that was once expected to prove the whole venture has now been reduced to a first-look arrangement, which in industry terms is usually read as a much softer commitment. Basically, we will take your call. Then, as ever, sold out in 45 minutes, which sounds impressive until you learn how limited the stock was from the start. After that, the apricot spread was reportedly oversold, forcing refunds for customers. And then came the candles, that, according to online chatter, arrived without wicks, turning another product drop into its own round of criticism. And that is why the conversation kept stretching far beyond one dinner table moment. Once the public starts tying together ratings, product launches, and brand moves, every small detail begins to feel loaded, even if the actual situation is far less dramatic than the internet makes it seem. In this case, the chatter was not just about what was said, but about what people thought it suggested. That kind of reaction can be tough to shake, because online audiences rarely look at one incident in isolation. They connect the dots, compare old clips, and turn the whole thing into a broader story about image, timing, and public perception. Supporters may see an overblown pile-on, while critics treat it as another sign that the pressure around the brand is still there, whether fairly or not. And once that narrative takes hold, even ordinary business updates start getting pulled into the same debate. Every move gets read through the same lens, every response gets dissected, and the story keeps growing because people online are still waiting to see what happens next.
Bon Maman, because Bon Maman is actually paying. This company is paying to be featured in this promo, because Meghan Markle's company, as ever, does not have any money left. She can't afford to pay for that. She is allegedly executive producer. How? I wouldn't even stand there, and she's standing there smiling unless Meghan Markle is getting a cut of whatever revenue from competition, showcasing their jam, their spread, their marmalade, their reserve.
Then there were the flower sprinkles, dried petals served on food, and they came with a price tag that got people talking. and the reviews did not exactly soften the blow. The Telegraph dubbed it Montecito Marie Antoinette, while the Times called it an ego trip in a sun hat. For season 2, the Times went even further, saying it was a series in search of a meaning, fronted by a woman in need of some cash.
But this Cookie Queen's campaign is going to fail because unfortunately Meghan Markle is using it to try and sell her jam. And the stories are completely unbelievable. Of course, GB News, which is suckered via its new Omid Scobie best pal Cameron Walker. Meghan Markle leaves interviewer stunned with bizarre jam admission. But as Queer Lips of Truth put it, that's because the bitch is lying. No reasonable human being takes Girl Scouts cookies and dips them. Meghan Markle is only trying to sell jam. Everything about her is contrived.
Lady C summed up the whole downward arc in one sharp line. She described Meghan as a D-grade actress who climbed to A-grade princess status, then slid all the way back down again, ending up, in her words, at the bottom of the scale. The point she was making was clear. Meghan has not delivered what many expected. And from the perspective of the woman who built her own lane, stepped away, and then rebuilt her public life under her own name, that kind of rise and fall simply does not make sense. And that is exactly where the real question begins. What is Meghan supposed to do now? Interestingly, one royal correspondent has already weighed in. Tom Sykes wrote this week that there is still one possible path open to her. Disappear. Raise the children, which is what she has repeatedly said gives her the greatest joy. Stay off social media for 2 years, or 3, or 5, then come back at 50 with something true to say and an honest accounting of what went wrong, and the public would give her a hearing. End quote. In other words, disappear for a while. That was the advice from someone who covers this family for a living. Then, he added the part that probably stings the most, because it is not meant as an insult, just a blunt reality check. It is simply true. Second acts are available. Martha raised questions about it, from a prison camp in West Virginia. That is where the debate gets bigger than one headline, because once people start talking about reinvention, every small move gets judged against the whole public record. Online, the conversation shifts fast, from a single dinner table moment to a larger question about whether a comeback is being helped or hurt by the way it is being presented. Some viewers think the criticism says more about internet impatience than about any one person's future, while others argue that a quieter reset might be the only way to lower the temperature. Either way, the reaction shows how quickly a brand story can become a public referendum, especially when people feel they have already seen the pattern once before. And that is why a suggestion like stepping back for a while gets so much attention. It is not just about being out of sight, it is about whether distance might allow the story to soften, the noise to fade, and the next chapter to land with less baggage. For anyone watching this unfold, that possibility is exactly what makes the conversation so hard to ignore.
But Meghan Markle has shown that she's a terrible at. I just shown you that she has no power or decision, making power over the Cookies Queen documentary, because if she had any decision power, she would have said, hey, use my jam, use my spread, use my marmalade. Why wouldn't she do that? Which means that she's only lending a royal title and name. I don't even think she's getting revenue, because if she's not putting any money, it really does not make any sense to allow a competitor to promote on a show or movie documentary that you, as a founder of Us Ever, who also has these kinds of products.
So that is where things have landed. Martha Stewart lost everything, stepped away, came back, and rebuilt the whole empire with her own name right out front. Meghan Markle was given a palace, a global platform, and the surname of one of the most famous families on earth. And now, according to the chatter, she is at a dinner in California, bringing up her father-in-law's name, while an 85-year-old woman she barely spoke to becomes the center of a very sharp magazine moment in the one outlet that was still speaking warmly about her. This is exactly why the Martha versus Meghan conversation keeps pulling people in, because it says a lot about reinvention, timing, and public image. If you want to keep following stories like this, like, subscribe, share, and comment what you think about that dinner table moment, and see you on the next one.